No.
No. Minister to move second reading, Secretary of State, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. This is a crime and policing bill to make our streets safer, to put neighbourhood policing back at the heart of communities after years of neglect, to give law enforcement the powers they need to protect the public and tackle the most serious violence, and to help communities take back their town centres from thieves or thugs, and to support this government's Safer Streets mission, a mission for the whole country to halve knife crime and violence against women and girls in a decade, and to rebuild confidence in policing and the criminal justice system by tackling the local crimes that undermine our communities most. Across our countries, we have strong communities, a British tradition of respect for the rule of law and respect for each other. A British policing tradition that goes back to Peel of policing by consent, the police embedded in communities, residents pulling together to prevent and tackle crime. And yet, in recent years, those traditions have become badly frayed. Too many town centres, neighbourhoods and public spaces plagued by antisocial behaviour. Shoplifting and street theft have soared, while neighbourhood police have been heavily cut back. And too many families forced to endure the agony of an empty chair at the dinner table night after night, having lost a loved one to knife crime. Yet it's easier than ever for children to get hold of lethal weapons online, and barely any penalties for gangs who recruit children into crime and get away with it. And too many women and girls still facing stalking, spiking, violence and abuse, feeling unsafe in the streets and their homes, even now, nearly 50 years on from the first Reclaim the Night marches in Leeds. And too many children still experiencing sexual abuse and exploitation, including grooming networks on the streets and online, with abuse online getting worse and worse. Yet child protection reforms we and others called for 10 years ago, still not in place. Trust in the police undermined by vetting failures and abuses of power, yet action promised several years ago to raise standards still not in place. And across the country, too many of us just hear the same thing, that people don't see the police on the streets anymore, they worry that respect for law and order has disappeared, and they fear that if something goes wrong, no one will come and nothing will be done. That is why it is time for change. That is why it is time for the measures we are setting out in this bill today, because safety and security are the bedrock of opportunity and the underpinning of every strong community. It's at the heart of our plan for change, the Safer Streets mission, because everyone has the right to live in freedom from fear. At the heart of the Labour government, I will give way to another member.
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. And she makes some very important points about neighbourhood policing. So does she therefore agree with me then that local police stations should be integral to this plan?
Well, local police stations are a matter for local forces, but they can be a central part of neighbourhood policing, which sadly has been heavily cut back in recent years. In fact, in many areas of the country, neighbourhood policing cut by a third or nearly a half. And at the heart of this Labour government's plan is rebuilding neighbourhood policing, a plan to put 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs back on the beat over the course of this Parliament, kick-started with £200 million of funding in the next financial year, and reversing the damage done under the last Conservative government through years of cuts to community police, half the number of PCSOs as there were 14 years ago, many thousands fewer neighbourhood police officers, and 54% of people saying they never see an officer on the beat. And that figure has doubled since 2010 as too many neighbourhood police have just disappeared. I'll give way to my honourable friend, and then I'll give way to the member opposite who signalled earlier.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way. A report by Harlow Council in 2023 said less than half of residents in Harlow felt safe going outside after dark. Does she see the neighbourhood police guarantee being part of the way of solving this problem?
Secretary of State.
Well, my honourable friend is right. Neighbourhood policing is crucial, and we have seen the neighbourhood policing teams decimated, often even those that were remaining being abstracted away or merged with other teams, something that's been deeply damaging. And that's why it's so crucial to get those neighbourhood police back on the streets, back into our town centres, back into our communities. I give way to the honourable member. I hope he'll apologise for the scale of cuts that his party's government brought in.
I thank the right honourable lady. You mentioned the 13,000 neighbourhood police. Obviously, 3,000 of those are going to be warranted officers, and I believe 3,000 of those are going to be operational police officers who are going to be brought back in from other places. Would the right honourable lady be able to tell us when police forces are going to find out what their share of those police forces will be, and also how those 3,000 that are currently in other roles will be reassigned, given that operational responsibilities are those of the Chief Constable and not the Home Secretary?
Secretary of State. So we have started with £200 million of funding for the next financial year, kick-starting the drive to put the 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs back on the beat. Already, the police forces have been working with the Home Office on plans, some ways to recruit new police officers, some to recruit new PCSOs, some to redeploy existing police officers, but then to backfill by recruiting other officers to take up their posts as well. So we will set out in due course the plans for the next financial year as part of that 200 million. But I have to tell the House that the cuts to neighbourhood policing over the last decade were even worse than we had thought. The previous Conservative government was so indifferent to neighbourhood policing that they didn't even keep a proper count of who was doing that work. They treated too often the neighbourhood police officers just the same as 999 response officers or local detective teams, and the Home Office guidance actually allowed forces to report some of their response officers as neighbourhood police instead. And they didn't have proper checks in place. So as a result, I can tell the House that hundreds and even thousands of officers and PCSOs were miscounted under the last government, and the Home Office and National Police Chiefs Council will later this month have to publish revised force-by-force figures so that communities properly can see what is happening in their area, because this government takes seriously the neighbourhood policing that must be that community-led policing in our towns and on our streets. I will give way on that point.
Thank the Home Secretary for giving way. It's courteous of her. But in terms of miscounting numbers, can I just drill down on the point that my honourable friend made earlier? Of the 13,000 new neighbourhood officers that the Home Secretary claims she is recruiting, can she comment that there will be 3,000 officers that will be diverted from an existing workforce? They're not new, are they? And can she also confirm that the police funding settlement that's been put down by the Home Secretary will actually lead to 1,873 officers being withdrawn?
Do you know, sadly, I just didn't hear that apology for the previous Conservative government's massive cuts to neighbourhood policing, including many towns and cities across their country, seeing their neighbourhood police slashed in half right across the country and communities badly let down. But I'm sure the next Conservative member to intervene will begin their question with a huge apology for the damage their party and their government did. I'm really pleased to hear the honourable member ready to give an apology for the deeply damaging legacy of his party in government.
I thank the Home Secretary for giving way. I think she should apologise for not answering the question. There were record levels of policing under the last government with the 20,000 extra police officers that were recruited. But I ask her again. She has said she is recruiting 13,000 new neighbourhood police officers. Can she confirm that 3,000 of those will be rediverted from extra officers? They're not new, are they?
Well, so still no apology for the deep damage that they have done. And let's be clear, they halved the number of PCSOs, halved them. They've cut the number of neighbourhood police officers, probably by more than 10,000. But you know what? We can't even be precise because their measuring of neighbourhood police officers was so ropey and so all over the place, we can't even be certain what the precise cuts were. This government is committed to increasing neighbourhood policing and PCSOs by 13,000. And in the first year of that neighbourhood policing increase, that will be funded by £200 million. That £200 million for the first year, that is already delivering plans from police forces across the country, which we will set out in due course, both to increase recruitment of new police officers and to increase recruitment of PCSOs, and also to redeploy some police officers, but those posts then being backfilled by the recruitment of other new police officers and staff elsewhere to fill those posts, something which I think the members opposite should hugely welcome, because it means for the first time in years getting the police back on the streets, into our communities, onto our streets and into our neighbourhoods. I give way to the honourable member at the back.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Antisocial behaviour is blighting communities in places like Windhill, Baildon, Cottingley and Denham as a direct result of the cuts made to neighbourhood policing by the party opposite. When I speak to local residents, they express concerns about the misuse of fireworks, drug dealing, fly tipping and dangerous use of e-bikes and scooters. So will the Secretary of State, as part of its Safer Streets mission, reassure me and my residents that these new neighbourhood police will tackle antisocial behaviour in communities like mine as a matter of urgency? Secretary of State.
Well, my honourable friend is exactly right, because we need the police back on the streets. And let's be honest, everyone can see it in their own communities. People know that the idea that honourable members opposite think somehow everything was hunky-dory at the end of their 14 years. Actually, communities across the country can see the reality. So yes, we need, as part of our neighbourhood policing guarantee, to get more boots on the beat, more town centre patrols, officers who know the community, trusted by the community, to go after local perpetrators, to prevent persistent crimes. And these aren't outlandish demands, this is just the basics. A return to the Peel principles that lie at the heart of British policing. The police are the public are the police, trusted officers in the community working to keep people safe. I will shortly. The bill gives those neighbourhood police more powers to tackle the local crimes that undermine and damage local communities: antisocial behaviour, street theft, shoplifting, harassment in our town centres. In too many areas, those are powers that were too often weakened in the past. I will in a second. Travelling around the country, I and many others will have heard the same story too many times. The shop owners who say thieves have become increasingly brazen, the crimes driven by organised gangs, and elderly shoppers who will say they just don't go into town anymore because they don't feel safe. Or people who've had their phones stolen in the streets, all the details of their lives whipped away from them. Residents driven mad by the soaring number of roaring off-road bikes and scooters ridden in an antisocial and intimidating way. And you know, in the 2 years before the election, shop theft went up by more than 60%. More than 60% in 2 years. Snatch theft, mainly mobile phone theft, went up by more than 50% in 2 years. More than 50%. Thousands of these crimes reported every single day, yet the police left with too few powers to act, and too often, after changes made by the previous Conservative government 10 years ago, left with weakened powers to tackle those antisocial behaviours and crimes. I'll give way to my honourable friend, and then I'll give way to the honourable member opposite.
Can I, my honourable friend for giving way, can I take this opportunity to welcome the introduction of a new offence for assaulting a shop worker? Yeah. I've been in shops in Worksop where I've seen shop workers absolutely fearful what's going to happen next, and I've seen food stolen underneath my eyes. And does the Minister agree with me that local shops must become no-go areas for lawbreakers?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
So my honourable friend is right, because this bill introduces stronger action on retail crime. And I want to thank Usdaw, the Co-op, the British Retail Consortium, the Association of Convenience Stores and more for their determined campaigning over many years to protect shop workers, because the very staff who kept our local communities going, staying open through the pandemic, but who in recent years have had to face a truly disgraceful escalation in threats, abuse and violence. This measure is something that our party has campaigned on for very many years, and through this bill we will introduce a specific offence of assaulting a retail worker, sending the message loud and clear that these disgraceful crimes must not be tolerated, because everyone has a right to feel safe at work. I give way to the honourable member.
I'm grateful to the Home Secretary. She's talked about neighbourhoods and she's talked about communities. One thing I haven't heard her talk about is the rural communities that I represent and the rural crime force. Could you say a little bit about what the bill's going to deliver when it comes to them? I'm very lucky to have Leicestershire. We have a rural crime team which has seen crime drop by 24% in their last report. But it has a massive impact on the fact of machinery being taken. Could you talk me through any measures that are being brought forward that will benefit my community?
The honourable member is exactly right to draw attention to this, because many of our rural communities are seeing sometimes different kinds of patterns of crime, but very often driven by organised gangs who think that somehow rural communities will be a soft touch, and where we've seen sometimes the GPS machinery for factories, where we do believe stronger action is needed, but where we are also working with the National Police Chiefs Council now on a new rural crime strategy that my Right Honourable friend, the Policing Minister, is working on, and I know she would be happy to follow up any specific issues that he wants to raise. So too often, crimes are dismissed as low-level, even though they leave residents in a living nightmare and corrode community life. So here are the things that this Labour government's crime and policing bill will change. We're introducing new respect orders the police and courts can use to ban repeat offenders from town centres, or to put new requirements on repeat perpetrators to prevent them causing havoc in the community, for example, requirements to take up drug or alcohol treatment. Currently, the police can't immediately seize bikes or vehicles that are being used in a dangerous, intimidating or antisocial behaviour way. They just have to give a warning and then hope they catch the same person again. But that means it can be 2, 3, 4 endless strikes and the bike is still on the road. Frankly, one strike should be enough. If the police find you using a bike or a vehicle in a dangerous or antisocial way, this bill means they will be able to seize it straight away and get those dangerous, damaging bikes off the road. We'll give the police stronger powers too to tackle rising snatch theft, because all of us will know constituents, friends or family who've had their phone stolen, and then they can track it, maybe through Find My iPhone or through other similar services, yet when they tell the police where their phone is, nothing is done. So we'll give the police new powers. Where they have electronic evidence from tracking technology on the location of stolen goods, to be able to enter and search premises without waiting for warrants to be put in place. And alongside that, ministers are working now with tech companies and with the police to pursue stronger action to design out and disincentivise phone theft, so we can go after the criminal gangs who are making people's lives a misery stealing phones on the street. And we will also take stronger action on shoplifting, because 10 years ago, the previous Conservative government introduced a new £200 rule, categorising shop theft below that as low value and sending a signal that has shaped the police response ever since, that that kind of crime should not be taken seriously. It became a Tory shoplifters' charter, a signal to thieves and gangs across the country that they could operate with impunity, wandering from shop to shop, stealing away because nothing would be done. But that kind of crime spreads, creates a sense of lawlessness and huge anger and frustration among the law-abiding majority who see criminals getting away with it and respect for the law hollowed out. So yes, this government will finally end the damaging £200 rule.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Will you also agree it's not just the shoplifting, it's the fear that is then put into our communities of those shop workers, but also particularly our local corner shops, our local accessible shops are there for elderly people that can't always get out to the big supermarkets or people that have difficulty, and that has put a fear of plight on them as well.
My honourable friend is right, because it's the fact of the crime, the disrespect, but also the sense of fear that it can create and the huge frustration for shop workers about the crimes that they see. But, you know, I'm glad to see there's some signs on the benches opposite of a change in heart. Members recognising how damaging their approach to town centre crime has been, the Shadow Home Secretary has written on Facebook, and I quote, "The police must have," and he puts this in capital letters, "zero tolerance to shoplifting and phone theft in Croydon, otherwise it will escalate. Stealing even less than £200 is illegal. So the police must focus ruthlessly on catching criminals and pursue every line of inquiry." Well, who'd have thought it? If that's what the right honourable gentleman now believes, why on earth didn't he take the opportunity in the 2 years that he was the policing minister to scrap the £200 threshold, which sent all the wrong signals across the police? Because we do know what part of his remedy, of course, to the disappearance of neighbourhood police and the soaring levels of town centre crime. He said, "Or the wider public do have the powers of citizens' arrest. And where it's safe to do so, I would encourage that to be used, including potentially a physical challenge, otherwise it will just escalate." So we'll put aside the intriguing suggestion that perhaps the Shadow Home Secretary wanders around with handcuffs in his pocket. I wonder if maybe he just misunderstood the Peel principle that the police are the public and the public are the police. What they meant was neighbourhood police in the community, not leaving the community to pick up arms because the neighbourhood police had gone. And as for reform, looks like they're too busy dealing with their own internal antisocial behaviour to even show up. So yes, this government will be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime, something that hasn't happened for far too long. Alongside the action on community crimes, Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill also introduces much stronger measures on some of the most serious crimes of all, including the knife crime that is destroying young lives, teenagers and young people who don't get to achieve their ambitions or fulfil their dreams, and parents and families left bereft. I will give way first, and I will give way.
I thank the Home Secretary for giving way. Last year, only 4 in 10 knife possessions actually resulted in any formal criminal justice outcome. Does the Home Secretary agree that by increasing police powers to seize, retain and destroy knives, which may be legally owned but which may be used in committing a crime, will actually reduce in the number of people carrying knives?
Our friend makes a really important point. We need to both prevent young people especially getting access to these dangerous weapons in the first place, but also make sure that there are proper interventions, including referrals to youth offending teams, and we don't simply have a system that shrugs its shoulder when young people are caught carrying knives. Knife-enabled offences recorded by the police rose by 9% in the 2 years up to the summer last year. And many people in this House will know the story of Ronan Kanda. And Rona was just 16 when he was stabbed to death with a ninja sword just yards from his home. He was killed by 2 other teenagers who'd bought not just the sword, but more than 20 other lethal weapons online with no questions asked and no proper checks. And it's because of the tireless campaigning by Ronan's mum Pooja that we've already launched plans to ban ninja swords following the implementation of the zombie knife ban this summer, and we commissioned Commander Stephen Clayman to do an end-to-end review of knife sales published a few weeks ago, which is driving some of the new measures we're introducing as part of this bill. The bill I will give way to my honourable friend, then I will give way to the honourable member, but let me just make a couple of other points first, and then I will come to them. The bill increases from 6 months to 2 years imprisonment the maximum penalties for offences relating to the sale and possession of offensive weapons. But following the claim and review, we will also bring forward amendments to the bill in this House to introduce stricter age verification checks with a stringent two-step age verification system for online knife sales, so customers have to submit photo ID at the point of purchase and again on delivery, and it will be a legal requirement to hand a package containing a knife to the buyer alone. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Could I thank the Home Secretary wholeheartedly for her work on this very important matter. In my constituency, 13-year-old Ollie Stevens was attacked and brutally murdered by 2 other boys. They had seen something like hundreds of images of knives online on 11 different social media platforms, and I warmly welcome in particular the consultation that she's announced to look into the potential penalties for tech executives who fail to act responsibly in this very important area.
My honourable friend raises a really important point, and he has raised the terrible case of the killing of Ollie Stevens with me before, and I know how incredibly devastating that has been for the whole community as well. And he is right that the online systems made it far too easy for young people to be able to get hold of lethal weapons, and also the content that too many of our young people are seeing online. And it's why the measures as part of the Online Safety Act that will strengthen the requirements on tech companies around material visible to children next summer, expected later this summer, will be important as well. But he's also right that we are introducing measures. We will bring forward amendments during the course of the bill to give effect to our manifesto commitment to introduce personal liability measures for senior managers of online platforms that fail to take action on illegal content concerning knives and offensive weapons, and will introduce a requirement for sellers to notify bulk or suspicious sales of knives to the police, because we've seen cases where effectively young people were able to become effectively arms traders, buying huge numbers of illegal weapons that should not have been sold to them, and then distribute them in the community as well. I will give way to the honourable member.
I thank the Secretary of State, and knife crime is a grave issue that I'm very welcome for any measures that can help to reduce that. I have the debate next Thursday on knife crime, and I would hope to see good representation from both sides of the House in debating how we can reduce the number of children and young people that are involved in knife crime, both as victim and perpetrator. The question I would like to ask, though, is with regards to knife sales online. 52% of fatal stabbings involve a kitchen knife. Only 3.6% are involved a zombie knife. I appreciate that there are measures in place to reduce the ability of people to obtain kitchen knives online, but everybody has a drawer full of knives at home. How would we take measures to reduce that?
Of course, the honourable member makes a really important point. We know that there is an issue about young people being able to get some of these really lethal weapons, because it becomes part of what they want to do. It part of the search for status is to carry particular kinds of weapons. But he's of course right that people can get access to dangerous knives in different ways, and we need stronger prevention across the board. It's why the Young Futures programme that we are working on is particularly important. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
The government's commitment to introducing a Young Futures programme to prevent young people from being drawn into crime is welcome, especially as youth services and hubs were hollowed out under the Conservatives. But does the Home Secretary agree that prevention must be at the centre of the mission to tackle knife crime in our communities and our country?
Yeah.
My honourable friend is right, and in order to tackle this really devastating crime, we have to address the prevention online, prevention in the community, access to weapons, also the response when young people are found carrying knives, and then the wider punishment and response as part of the youth justice system and the interventions to turn things around too, and also to tackle some of the criminal gangs who are drawing young people into crime crime and violence in the first place, including drawing young people into county lines, including drawing young people into drug running and into the kinds of criminal activity that leads to violence, to the carrying of knives and to dangerous crimes later on. And that's why it's so important that the bill will also introduce for the first time a specific offence of child criminal exploitation, because gangs should never be able to get away with exploiting young people in that way. I will give way.
On the point raised by the member opposite of kitchen knives, which are the main weapon that are used, will the Home Secretary look at the issue of pointed kitchen knives, which is what causes so many deaths? Both the existing knives can be blunted and rounded off if there are incentives to do that, and also that manufacturers can be persuaded, as some do, to sell knives with rounded points.
Well, my friend makes a really kind of interesting point, and this is something that has been raised with us as part of the coalition against knife crime that we have brought together, bringing together campaigning families, campaigning networks and organisations. They have raised this, and as a result, that issue is being looked at further as well. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are a range of measures, both in the bill, on the face of the bill, and also that will be brought forward as amendments, which together, these measures make up Ronan's law. And Pooja, Ronan's mother, has said, and I quote, "I wish this was done years ago, and my son would be with me today." So we are taking action in memory of Ronan, but also as a tribute to Pooja and all Ronan's family who have campaigned so hard to keep other children safe. The bill also brings in stronger measures to tackle violence against women and girls, the abuse and exploitation of children. And this, according to the Crime Survey for England and Wales, 1 in 4 women has experienced domestic abuse, 1 in 4 has suffered sexual assault, 1 in 5 has been stalked. These are the most traumatic and appalling crimes. It is high time we treated this as the national emergency it so clearly is. Decade after decade, we have said the warm words in this House, and yet too little has changed. It is imperative, not just through this bill, but across the board. This is part of our ambition to halve violence against women and girls within a decade, an integral part of the Safer Streets mission, because no one should live in fear. I give way to the honourable member.
Home Secretary for giving me the chance to just make a point for the record. We're very pleased, Home Secretary, those of us who represent Northern Ireland, to know there'll be, I think it's 51 clauses that will affect Northern Ireland through a consent motion. I think it's important that we recognise the benefits that will have, not just for here but for Northern Ireland as well. Can the Minister perhaps just confirm, there may be 1 or 2 other ones we would like to see but aren't there perhaps? Has the Minister had an opportunity, so the Home Secretary had an opportunity to speak to the Minister, relevant Minister, Police and Justice Minister in Northern Ireland, to understand what we would like to have, which isn't maybe just there now, but which we would like to see for the future? Thank you so much.
We have had discussions with Northern Ireland ministers, and very happy for those discussions to continue. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very conscious of the time, and I know how many people want to speak. So if I can, I will now make progress through the remaining measures, because we do have, as part of the legislation, measures that will better protect people from stalking, making stalking protection orders more widely available, introducing a new criminal offence of administering a harmful substance, including by spiking. Measures that I know my honourable friend, the member for Rotherham, has long campaigned for, around strengthening the management of offenders in the community, to introduce enhanced notification requirements for sexual offenders, for registered sexual offenders, and a bar on changing their names where there is a risk of sexual harm, and stronger measures to protect our children, one of the most fundamental responsibilities of all. This bill will create a new duty to report child sexual abuse, backed up by criminal sanctions for those who seek to cover up abuse by preventing or deterring someone carrying out the duty, something the independent inquiry on child sexual abuse recommended, something the Prime Minister and I both called for over a decade ago. Will make grooming an aggravating factor in the sentencing of child sexual offences, because these are some of the most vile and damaging of crimes, and it will introduce new criminal offences to combat the use of artificial intelligence technology in the making and sharing of child sexual abuse, and stronger action against those who organise grooming online, where the scale of abuse and crime is increasing steeply. If I may, Mr Deputy Speaker, I will give way one last time.
I thank the Minister greatly for doing that. I recognise what's happening in clauses 45 to 54 about mandatory duty in England to report child sexual abuse. And I'd wondered if I might draw the Minister's attention, particularly the Secretary of State's attention, that there are exceptions dating back to 1603 under canon law for confessions relating to treason. There's also precedent in Section 38B of the Terrorism Act of 2000 relating to terrorism, which cover those faith leaders. But I wondered if the Minister might meet with me to discuss how we might help the various churches and faith leaders and volunteers in England to make sure that they do mandatorily report when they come across this stuff in confession.
The Policing Minister is happy to meet the Honourable Member to discuss the detail of this. I think it's imperative that all institutions, all organisations across communities take responsibility for tackling these appalling and damaging crimes. And then alongside those measures, we're also brings in measures around national security, including introducing a new youth diversion order to help managing the increasing number of young people who are being investigated or arrested for terrorism-related activity, where the counter-terror police have said that their caseload of young people has trebled in the space of just 3 years, and more action is needed. There are further measures, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure we will discuss in committee and later in this debate, around strengthening standards in policing, ensuring that chief officers and local policing boards have the right to appeal the result of misconduct boards to the police appeal tribunals, to make sure that those who are not fit to serve can be removed from policing, but also the standards of police officers who do an incredible job across the country can be maintained. And on accountability, we will bring forward amendments to establish a presumption that firearms officers who are charged with offences relating to and committed during their duties will have their anonymity preserved during the court process, so we can maintain the confidence of firearms officers in the work that they do, as well as the confidence of communities. Madam Deputy Speaker, safety from harm is not a privilege, it's a fundamental right that should be afforded to everyone, no matter their circumstances. No one should be left to live in fear because of crime and antisocial behaviour in their communities. Under this government, Safer Streets is a mission for us all to draw our communities together, put police back on the beat, introduce the respect orders, the action on off-road bikes, shoplifting, street theft, stalking, spiking, grooming and child abuse, on knife sales, terrorism and serious crime, stronger action against criminals, stronger support for victims, restoring respect for the rule of law and police to our streets, ultimately to build a better, fairer Britain founded on safety and security for all. I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Before I call the Shadow Secretary of State